History always has its hidden treasures or canon events that are always left unspoken or forgotten, and when it comes to people's stories, some are often misunderstood or misspoken. Hi, my name is Jessa, and please join me as we look together our top 10 amazing women who changed history. And before we begin, in the last video I was in, top 10 haunted places in the Philippines banned to the public, I did give you guys a riddle. Did you get it? The riddle was, what has roots as nobody sees, is taller than trees, up it goes, and yet never grows? The answer is, drumroll please, a mountain. Your next riddle will be at the end of this video. Anyways, let's get started. Number 10, Nellie Bly. When you know you want to do something right, you do it. And that's what American journalist Nellie Bly did. Born Elizabeth Cotran Seaman, she used her pen name Nellie Bly as she went undercover at the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Roosevelt Island. During this asylum expose, Nellie had difficulty getting admitted, so she checked herself into a boarding house and stayed up all night to make herself look distraught and disturbed. She refused to go to bed and eventually scared the other patrons at the boarding house, and finally, she was admitted by police where she experienced firsthand on the field of mistreatments, the devastating conditions, and the harm patients had to endure. In her report published in 1887 and later published in a book, 10 Days in a Madhouse, it caused such a sensation it prompted the asylum to implement reforms and shed light on the significant impact on American culture. She covered the women's suffrage procession and was the first woman and reporter to visit war zones in World War I between Serbia and Austria. In 1998, she was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. Number 9, Josephine Baker. Paris, Paris, Paris is how much she loved Paris. Frida Josephine Baker was an American-born French dancer, and her career was primarily in Europe, specifically in France. She was the first African-American woman to star in a motion picture and to perform with an integrated cast at the American Concert Hall, and was one of the first African-American entertainers who achieved acclaim both in movies and on stage. She was also a World War II spy and a passionate activist. When the German forces invaded France during World War II, Josephine joined the fight against the regime. She aided French military officials by passing on secrets she heard while performing in front of the enemy, and she would transport the confidential information by writing with invisible ink on music sheets. After performing successfully for many years in France, she decided to return to the US, where she returned and came face to face with segregation and discrimination, something she had not dealt with since she was a child in St. Louis. She refused to perform for segregated audience, and as she was the first few women to speak at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, she said, "You know, friends, that I do not lie to you when I tell you I have walked into the palaces of kings and queens and into the houses of presidents and much more, but I could not walk into a hotel in America and get a cup of coffee, and that made me mad." Baker's career illustrated the ways entertainers can use their platforms to change the world. Number 8, Anna May Wong. Before Michelle Yeoh, there was Anna May Wong as Hollywood's first Asian American movie star. Wong was a groundbreaking talent in every way. She bravely fought racism and discrimination and starred in over 50 films. It was when she was 14 that she got her role in The Red Lantern, and at 17, she was given the starring role in Madame Butterfly. With other successes along the way, she still felt constrained by Hollywood, as it was extremely common and normalized for white actors to be casted as Asian roles, practiced they dubbed yellowface. Because of this, she commented how they would rather cast other races, specifically white ones, for Chinese ones, and if it was a lead role, she would still play the subservient woman or the dragon lady, which plays into the Hollywood stereotypes of Asian women being exotic temptresses or submissive. Even in a movie starring a Chinese family, they offered her the conniving concubine role, which she turned down and said, "You're asking me with Chinese blood to not only unsympathetically role in the picture featuring an all-American cast portraying Chinese characters," and the part that Wong actually wanted was given to a white actress who won an Oscar for that role. But on the bright note, in 1960, 1 year before her death at the age of 56, Anna May Wong did become the first American woman to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Number 7, Juana Inés de la Cruz. Good girls gone bad, or at least that's what the courts during Juana Inés de la Cruz would say about her. The colonial Mexican writer, philosopher, composer, and poet of the Baroque period, as well as a nun, was one of the most amazing women of her time. She is a symbol of Mexican nationalism, freedom of speech, women's rights, sexual diversity, and so much more. She had so many suitors growing up, but because she was more in love with her thirst of knowledge instead, she realized she couldn't escape the subject of suitors or marriage, so she said, yeah, I'm just gonna be a nun instead. The benefit was that the convent she was at also had a large library, and she constantly defended a woman's right to formal education and advocate women's rights to serve as intellectual authorities, and not just through the act of writing, but through the publication of their writing. She heightened the importance of women teaching other women to protect young women from older men from intimate situations, and being a nun and talking hot stuff, the Catholic Church didn't like it either. She said, "I'm gonna keep on writing," and she wrote 100 works, which only few had survived. In present times, Sor Juana is still an important figure in Mexico. Number 6, Marsha P Johnson. Marsha P Johnson was one of the most prominent figures of the gay rights movement of the 1960s and 1970s in New York City. Always smiling, Johnson was an important advocate for homeless LGBTQ+ youth, those affected by HIV and AIDS, and gay and transgendered rights. After graduating from high school, Marsha adopted the name Marsha P Johnson, where the P means pay it no mind, a phrase that became her motto. New York State still persecuted gay people and frequently criminalized their activities and presence. When Johnson met 11-year-old Sylvia Rivera, a Puerto Rican transgendered girl, the two became instant friends. Rivera says Johnson was like a mother to her and encouraged Rivera Rivera to love herself and to be who she is. After all, sometimes we would have to choose our families when our blood families are sometimes just not equipped to learn how to love us the way we need them to. Billy Porter. Then Stonewall happened. In 1969, police raided the bar and began arresting many, mainly gay men, and when Rivera and Johnson arrived, they saw the entire place was engulfed in flames. From that moment, Stonewall galvanized the gay rights movement, and the first gay pride parade took place in 1970. Drag had saved her life as well as so many others, and Johnson was diagnosed with HIV and tried to advocate more for its awareness, as many had already lost their lives to it. Sadly, on July 6, 1992, her body was found in the Hudson River. Although police suspect she took her own life, many of her friends felt it was foul play. Hundreds of people showed up for Marsha's funeral, as she remains one of the most recognized and admired LGBTQ+ advocates. Number 5. Joan Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Joan Ruth Bader Ginsburg was an American lawyer and jurist who served as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1993 till her death in 2020. She was the first Jewish woman and second woman to serve on the court after Sandra Day O'Connor. Her career began when she started at Cornell University and then Harvard Law, where she was the only one out of 9 women out of a class of 500 men. She even said that the dean at the Harvard at the time had the audacity to ask her and the other women in her class, "Why are you at Harvard School taking the place of a man?" The same dean would then reject her application to enroll for her 3rd year at Harvard, where she would then transfer to Columbia Law and graduate first in her class. She taught civil procedures as well as one of the few women in her field and spent much of her legal career as an advocate for gender equality and women's rights. Her impact and recognition have been endless and had been noted with lifetime achievements. She had changed the United States with her position in the Supreme Court, and with her drive for equality and rights, she was also known as the pop culture icon known as the notorious RBG. Ginsburg died from complications from pancreatic cancer on September 18, 2020 at the age of 87. Number 4. Frida Kahlo. Yes, my beloved Frida Kahlo, the artist whose work inspired so many, especially other women. Born in Mexico, Frida was always the type to not succumb to the subservient rules of being a woman. She would often dress in suits and family photos and also enjoy relishing her youth in hopes of becoming a medical student. But after a bus accident that left her critically bedridden at 18 years old, she would suffer a lifelong pain and medical problems. During and after her recovery, she began to recall her love of childhood art and began a series of paintings that are renowned as classic art pieces today. Kahlo's time in the United States was beneficial for her artistic expression. She experimented with different techniques and her paintings began to show a stronger narrative style. Many of Kahlo's paintings are concerned with medical imagery, which is represented in terms of pain and hurt, featuring Kahlo's bleeding and displaying her open wounds. Although Kahlo featured herself in events from her life in her paintings, they were often ambiguous in meaning. She did not only use them to show her subjective experience, but to raise questions about Mexican society and the construct of identity within it, particularly gender, race, and social class. Kahlo's legacy had been commemorated in several ways, and her life and art have been paid tribute as they have continuously inspired artists in various fields. Number 3. Ada Lovelace. I wasn't good at math, but Ada Lovelace definitely was. Known as the Countess Lovelace, she was noted as an English mathematician and writer, chiefly known for her work on Charles Babbage's proposed mechanical general-purpose computer, the analytical machine. She was the first to recognize that the machine had applications beyond calculations. Essentially, Ada is considered the first computer programmer. And even though she wrote about a computer, the analytical engine, that was never built, she realized that the computer could follow a series of simple instructions, a program, to perform a complex calculations as well as be used to perform operations on other things besides number, such as musical notes. From a modern perspective, her work is visionary. In her lifetime, her scientific contributions hardly attracted any attention. Only a small piece of the analytical engine was ever built, and Ada Lovelace died in 1852. Her fame, of course, lives on, as she is noted as the Ada programming language and is celebrated on the second Tuesday in October, which is actually coming up soon as Ada Lovelace Day on October 10th, 2023. Number 2. Katherine Johnson. Speaking of science, although Hidden Figures was more dramatized with that incredible scene acted out by Kevin Costner smashing the colored washroom sign, the real Katherine Johnson said she would just use the white washrooms either way. And as incredible and wonderful as she is alongside Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson was an American mathematician whose calculations of orbital mechanics at NASA were critical to the success of the first and subsequent US Cruz space flights. She had earned a reputation for mastering complex manual calculations and helped pioneer the use of computers to perform the task. The space agency notes her historical role as one of the first African American women to work at NASA as a NASA scientist. After graduating at the age of 14 from high school, she took every mathematics course offered at her college at WVSC. Several professors mentored her, including chemist and mathematician Angie Turner King. She was then able to launch her career as a research mathematician, and although it was extremely difficult for African Americans to enter, she was able to get into NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which later turned into NASA. In her career, she worked as a computer where she calculated the trajectory for Alan Shepard, the first American in space, and John Glenn, who did personally ask her to recheck the calculations before his flight on Friendship 7, where he became the first American to orbit the Earth. Number 1. Sojourner Truth. And finally, our number 1, The Truth Will Set You Free. Born as Isabel Bumblebee, she was an American abolitionist activist for African American civil rights and women's rights. Truth was born into slavery, but after a man who enslaved her lied about setting her free, she took her infant daughter and escaped. After going into court, she was able to recover her son and was the first black woman to win a case against a white man. She then changed her name to Sojourner Truth after she became convinced that God had called out to her to leave the city and testify the hope that was in her. She was captivating in her speech and passionate, and even though she was at risk many times of mobs ambushing her, she said in quote, "I feel safe in the midst of my enemies, for the truth is powerful and will prevail." In her famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" had been noted as one of the most important speeches in history. I'll briefly go over the speech as she says. "That man over there says that women needs to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns and no man could heed me. And ain't I a woman? I work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it and bear his lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?" Sojourner was a faithful woman to God and a powerful voice who still impacts truth and support to women everywhere. From education, civil rights, freedom of speech, art, film, and music, so many of these incredible women showcase the changes that impact our world today in ways that we don't even know. And it's through that inspiration I hope inspires you to encourage those around you to do the same. After all, if you've got a voice, all you have to do is learn how to use it and use it for good. Who was your favorite and did you learn anything interesting today? Let me know. Oh yeah, your next riddle. Are you ready? What is it that no one wants to have but no one wants to lose either? Please put your answer in the comments below and I'll reveal the answer in the next video. Top 10 bizarre Greek mythology stories that we still can't explain. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jessa. Be sure to like and subscribe and I'll see your beautiful faces in the next one. Bye!